You're listening to KZUU 90.7 FM Pullman, or a broadcast service of the ASWSU. I'm your host, DJ Daisy, and welcome to episode 8 of What's New Wazzu. I'm joined today by a former DJ and a sincere friend of mine, Jon Roanhaus. Thank you so much for making the time to be here today.
You are welcome. Happy to do it.
I met Jumbo 2 years ago when I first joined the radio, and my set was right after his set. And so once a week, I think it was Wednesday the first year and Tuesday the next year.
Something like that.
Yeah, I'd run into him and get to talk to him.
I remember the look on your face when you walked in, you saw this old guy sitting behind the mic's like, what's this? But you're really friendly and open about it, which is not the typical response.
Yeah, well, I was happy to just meet the people that were here before me, So anyways, now that you know how Jumbo and I have met, we've, crossed paths through the radio since then. And here we are finally getting to be on a show together, which I think is pretty cool. So thanks.
It's your instigation.
Yes, yeah. I did orchestrate all of this. All right. Well, I got lots of questions for you, but let's start from maybe in chronological order. Okay. I would just love to get to know and understand your life story a little bit. So how old are you now?
72.
72. All right.
Halfway to 73 if you're really going to count.
What were you doing when you were 20 and in college? Or
I went to college at Western Washington University. It wasn't called that then. It was called Western Washington State College, which is more of a singular college focused on education majors pretty much.
Okay.
Egghead school, as some of us think. And an egghead school being a place where people who are not, say, athletically oriented or not involved with sciences or unless it's teaching science, would go. People who are very academically oriented. And at any rate, if I was 21 years old, that would be the year I got out of school. And so I wanted to be a teacher because it was the one thing I was really good at. I wasn't good at other things that normal people would want to be. And I had lots of friends or people who like me were teachers. So that was kind of the motivation. And once I got used to standing in front of people and talking, which is not easy, especially when they're skeptical teenagers.
Oh, yeah. I don't even know how you do it. I was not the best teenager.
I'm not. Well, no, I wasn't either. But, and it's not my normal demeanor to be tough and to look authoritative. So I have to kind of put on a front for that one, depending on your audience. And but that's something I wanted to do. And I wanted to get out of where I was living, which was Nevada, which is where I went to high school. And it's not even against Nevada, it just wasn't where I wanted to live. So
fair enough.
One of my teacher friends lived in Western Washington. And he was somebody I met in Nevada, but he went back to where he came from. And I went up to visit him when I was in high school. And that was my introduction to the state of Washington.
Cool. And after you graduated from what is now Western Washington University, did you go straight into teaching?
No. I've always been an impractical person. And taking people's advice has not always been my long suit. And as my dad once characterized me as being in my own little world. And so I didn't want to teach in Washington at that time, and I wanted to move back to where I came from and try doing it there, which was not easily done at that time. Moreover, in the 70s, if you're going to be a social studies teacher, you'd better be a coach. And I didn't find this out at the right point. So.
Interesting.
Yeah, and not being athletically oriented for the most part. That's nothing I'm against it. I just don't have it. And anyway, that's something I hadn't done.
So, but you went into, did you go back to Nevada? Is that where you started?
No, I live in 7 states.
7 states. I know you're from the East Coast.
No, I'm from the Chicago area.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's
Chicagoland. Well, that's east of here.
East of here.
So yeah, that's in the eastern third of the country.
Yeah.
But no, it's very Midwestern. No eastern in Chicago.
Okay. Yeah. So
Yeah.
is that where you went to teach originally?
No.
Okay.
I just wanted to live in the Midwest because that's where I came from. I missed it. And
Fair
when
enough.
you're young, you're idealistic, you miss things about your youth that you want to go back to. And in my case, we had a summer house when I was growing up in southeastern Wisconsin, and it was right across from a lake, and there was a park there, so you had a direct view of the lake facing the east, and went out swimming every day in the summer. And so anyway, it was sort of an idealized childhood in the summertime.
Yeah.
And so that had a power over me when I was young.
Fair enough.
So it was Minnesota is where I ended up.
Okay. I've never been to that part of the country, but I've only heard beautiful things about it.
Well, you have to go there in January, February, you might not think that.
Yeah, I guess it's quite cold.
I managed in one of my wanderings around the country in January 1977. I've told this story hundreds of times. The average temperature where I lived was 2. The whole month.
Average.
That was the average, the whole month. And we had 3 weeks of nights at 20 below zero or colder, which bottomed out at 3 weeks, and which bottomed out at 30 below zero. And that was the year that Lake Michigan froze over in the middle, and which is unusual even for then. And it was before climate change became a visible thing. But at any rate, to put that in perspective, that's 70 miles of ice.
Yeah.
That's how big it is.
That's a lot of ice.
Yeah.
Wow. I just experienced my pipes freezing for the first time a few weeks ago. So
that was a cold snap. There's been a mild winter here, and by my standards. But that was a cold snap of a Minnesota order. 16 below zero is real temperature.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine. All right, well, so after college, you move back to the, not the East Coast, but how did you describe it?
The Midwest.
The Midwest, okay, yeah. The Midwest.
The flatlands are boring with all the, there are no mountains and there's no ocean.
Plenty of lakes, though.
Yeah, and sort of the Rust Belt is what it's called nowadays, and that was never in favor unless you were a certain type of person.
Yeah.
Everybody wanted to live in California, or they wanted to live in Florida, or they want a lot of people that I grew up with moved to Florida.
Yeah.
I don't want to deal with the winter anymore.
That's how my mom felt. She moved to Florida,
and
she was in California, and she still felt that way.
Yeah, California, the Bay Area. Well, depending where you live, it's pretty mild winters. But
Definitely.
I mean, moreover, if you live in San Francisco, the damp fog is pretty forbidding.
Yeah, and constant.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so you moved to the Midwest, and you live out your childhood summer house and activities. What next?
Well, I had several missed takes on how to do it, and I went back during the Arab oil embargo the first time.
Okay.
To not having a job and just a place that was behind a bowling alley. It was all right, and a nice view of the farm country around it. It was $50 a month. There was nothing to do. And I went to the employment security official that was in town and joined the military, was his advice. It's like, I just got through college in the Vietnam era. Why would I do that?
Yeah.
So anyway, I was like, this isn't going to work. So I picked up everything in the car, voided the lease, and I moved to the next place I thought would be interesting, which is Boulder, Colorado, which was kind of en route to going out to Nevada.
Okay.
So I lived there twice. It's a wonderful place, but it's always been expensive, and it's really expensive nowadays. Yeah.
Not as cold though. From what you're used to,
no,
or is it close?
They have sort of Midwestern winters there. A Boulder has, it could be 20 below zero, and you have 3 feet of snow on the ground, and 2 weeks later it'll be 60, which that doesn't happen in Minnesota. Yeah. So, and then usually the change between those two is 100-mile-an-hour winds. So,
wow.
Yeah, I love living in Boulder, but it wasn't a place that was going to be a long-term thing.
That's intense.
Yeah.
All right. So you moved to Colorado. How'd you end up back here in Washington after going to college here?
Well, after the second time in Boulder, and it's like I think too much, too self-absorbed and too self-critical and full of self-doubt. And it's like, what am I going to do? How am I going to make this work? Mm-hmm. So I went back to what I thought might be workable from when I was in college. And I went back to trying to get a teaching job, which I did. And it was in 8th grade, and I made every mistake possible, being too nice and too friendly and too accepting, and I paid a price for that. And I really connected with a lot of students, but on the other hand, it was a difficult year.
Do you have any stories in particular from those years?
I don't know if there's anything that's worth repeating. I just had a lot of noise.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things I wanted to do to be creative, which you could still do in those days, that I couldn't do because I just didn't have enough classroom control. Mm. And it wasn't the kind of classroom control where you had people standing up or people beating on other people, which was more common in the 80s, believe it or not, than it is now. It was more just a lot of noise. And getting something where you could walk out of the classroom and the place wouldn't erupt, I wasn't at that point. And one thing I learned is once you cross that line with, here's what Mr. Roanhaus will put up with,
Mm-hmm.
it'll keep going from there, and you can't get it back.
I see.
And next year you can get it back, but not
That year.
No.
Interesting.
So anyway, I could have done things differently, but
Was music ever anything you used a tool that you used in the classroom?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes it would
so?
be. I played some music from the Renaissance for the 8th graders, and of course that's
right over their head. Mine
was like, they're looking at their watch. It's like, do we have to do this? One time when I was substituting in Palouse, the town up north, we were studying World War II, and I played them a couple of World War II songs, which got the attention of the neighboring teacher next door. Well, goes, nice try.
Right over their heads as well. Huh?
Yeah. Well, no. You have half the kids would listen, and the other half was like,
yeah.
So what is this old fogey stuff? Yeah.
That is interesting.
Yeah, but I have, and if I were, well, it's probably too late. Nobody's going to hire somebody who's in their 70s to be a full-time job as a teacher. But I would use it, and I had teachers that used it in the past.
Yeah,
including teachers that I liked and had something of a relationship with.
That's cool. One of my teachers here, as a college professor, does that too. They start their class with music, and it doesn't go over our heads now because we're older, which is
what's the class and what's the music?
It's Jamie Flathers, who the English professor I had on a few episodes ago.
He's an interesting person.
Yeah, and she would often play like classic rock. Is like the genre she grew up listening to.
We avoided here at KZUU. It's like, we don't want this. It's already been played to death.
No, she'll play it to death a little bit more, and we love it.
Okay, well, it's still on the air for a reason.
Yep. Anyways, all right, so you're back in Washington now. I would love to get to know what inspired you to join college radio and this radio station, as well as U of I's radio station, which I believe you started at.
I started here first.
Oh, you started here first?
Yeah.
All right.
And I picked January of 2020 to start. And guess what happened in March? Well,
COVID. Yeah.
So, I did it for a couple of months, and everything shut down. I mean, my hours were halved. The UREC closed. They stopped doing this entirely. And so one thing led to another, and it was several months before anything came back to something approximating normal. So I was sitting around like, I'd still like to do this, and I don't know what's going on with this. And nobody was communicating from over here. Yeah. And so I just looked at the competition's webpage, and they were looking for people.
They stole you.
Yeah, no, I didn't want to cite them on air here because it's not the enemy. There's very little overlap that I'm aware of.
Yeah. We don't talk.
Yeah. So I usually refer to it as the competitor station on the other side of the invisible line.
Yes.
Yeah. So, but anyway, and I just went over there, and the guy who was the program director at the time, interesting guy, and he was thrilled to meet me because why would somebody this age want to do this? And so one thing led to another, and just started over there. So that was in September 2020.
That's awesome.
And wear a mask even in Idaho for 5 months. First 5 months I wore a mask.
Really?
That was a nice day in March when I took it off. It's like, yes.
You felt the same way.
Yeah.
For sure. So did you, for the listeners that aren't aware, your set that you do is called Mix Up.
Right.
And you're DJ Jonbo.
Right.
Have you always gone by Jonbo? Has that been a nickname that you created for the radio? Or?
Well, I can tell you what the origin is, but people probably... But anyway, I was in accounts receivable for 35 years, which is after I decided that I didn't think I was going to be able to go forward as a teacher. I had to have something, and one thing led to another, and I had a boss in Seattle that approached me to do accounts receivable type work, even though I had no degree in accounting. And I was really good at it, even though it was something well out of my core competence. And anyway, so one thing led to another with that, and I did it for 35 years, but I maintained my interest in music. And when I was in college, we didn't have a college radio station. So there's a number of things we didn't have that people take for granted nowadays.
If you had one, do you think you'd have joined it then?
I tried.
Oh, really?
Because I worked in a record store for a while, and I had one of the people that worked with me who had a show on this radio station.
Oh, cool.
But in those days, you had to go take an FCC test.
Oh,
to get a license.
Really?
Yeah.
Each individual DJ had to do that?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And you posted it on the wall and everything else. And
wow.
Some of the material on the test wasn't in the booklet they gave out. And
well,
so
that's not fair.
Yeah, well, life isn't fair. But anyway, I didn't get a passing score, which was really embarrassing because I owned being a pretty good student.
Yeah.
And anyway, so that didn't happen. But it was always sort of this germ in the back of my mind. I want to do this someday. And so my only hurdle here was when I came to live in Pullman was I knew I had music that would be worth hearing, and my chops would be fine. It was the persona going to work. And so I have to. About half of me is sort of hiding in the corner over here, and half is kind of an outgoing person, and so they're kind of at war all the time. So am I going to be good enough, articulate enough, interesting enough to be on the radio? So it took me about a month of just
figuring it out.
No, I just every time I come up here and like so 20 minutes before I go on air is like performance anxiety city.
Well, that is really surprising to hear because it doesn't show. You can't tell.
Okay, that's good.
I would have never guessed that you felt that way about this.
The quote is you can fool all the people all of the time. Maybe no.
Yeah. Well, you fooled me for sure.
Well, one of the things I say on the air about being a DJ is one of the things that help you with is your self-confidence.
Definitely.
And being able to present things to people that they'll understand and enjoy. And that doesn't come to everybody, and it doesn't grow on trees. And so it helped me with that. And I was just able to, I had a friend that did this, and he was the guy I worked in the record store for. And he says, don't look at the microphone so you don't do this. Because as you kind of...
Then you start,
yeah. Is this okay? What do I sound like?
That's a good point. Wow, I never thought about that.
Yeah. I did a podcast for the other competitor station because they asked me to.
Really?
Because I was their senior DJ, of the ones they wanted to interview, I guess. But anyway, and so I was driving around one day and I hear this person talking about how difficult it was in the pandemic and how you wear a mask and all. It's like, wow, that's similar to my experience. And it's like, wait a minute, that's me. And it was really disorienting hearing yourself on the radio.
That must have been bizarre.
Yeah, it was. And
totally.
It's like, I guess I sounded all right. So I wasn't too self-critical about it. But
right on.
Anyway.
All right. Well, back to your show called Mix Up. It's a mix up of genres. It always has been. Do you play the same type of show or set at U of I?
Yes. And in some cases, this is giving away a trade secret. I didn't play the exact same show because there's some things on this station that they don't like you to do, even though I had a waiver, as you know, because you were the one that was instrumental in said waiver. But I would change the order or change the theme. Sometimes I'd add something that would work better here than over there. I mean, I don't know the audience in either case because you don't hear about it. Yeah. Just the numbers I had over there were way high. And then in their better periods, they had 800 listeners.
Wow.
And average listening time was 8 minutes. And it's like, that's way high. And the average listening time seemed okay, but 800 listeners in a community of 25,000 people, that's a real audience. But
how did they know?
They must have some kind of service. And I just asked the then station manager what kind of numbers we had because I was just curious.
Yeah.
And that's what he came up with.
Interesting.
Yeah, they had some sort of monitoring service, or I don't know, Spinatron might have something like that.
Yeah. Where
they can gauge it, but I just think that's high. It used to be a big deal. I mean, having a college radio show was a big deal. The point where it'd be competitive. You'd have to really be good, and you'd have to know somebody, and you'd have to sort of start with the worst possible assignments in the middle of the night, and then you graduate to the better assignments.
As I've been learning more about the history of this station, and that's exactly the case. Like it was very competitive what time slots you were able to do your show.
Right.
And if you were in like a high priority time slot, you had to play the music that our audience wanted to hear at that time.
Yeah.
It was, it's much different.
Same thing over there. And I was just offered Friday night, and I thought, that's pretty good. I can do that one. Yeah. So I just took what I was offered.
Do you prefer a day or a night show?
I've done both. I've never done morning. I would do something different. They'd mix up. It would be something that's more down tempo, maybe, depending on what day of the week it was. We had a anniversary show over there where I went in voluntarily at 6 o'clock in the morning for an hour.
Wow!
And so I played trance music. Oh, it was something. The people that heard that were probably like, "What?" But trance music, not the dance kind of trance music, but what I think of as trance music, which is static, and it's like ambient is usually what it's called.
Okay, yeah. I see what you're saying.
Yeah, but it's usually been evenings, and if you want an audience, I think evenings are better.
Yeah.
Which I did. I do want to be heard. That's one of the things when you're a DJ, you want to be heard.
Definitely.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
No. That's cool. Well, the music that you've that you want to be heard in your mix-up with lots of different genres. So I sourced a question from our project or our program director, Zeke, and he wants to know how, like, if your set is made up of so many different genres, what is it about the song or the album or the artist that stands out to you beyond the genre that they're in?
Well, I try to start off with something that's fairly high energy.
Okay.
I don't know. The people I know are listening, listen to the whole show, all 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
So that's nice to bring an audience with me, but you can't count on that.
Yeah.
So I try to do the more energetic material early on, and then I try to have compatible combinations from there on. So there'll be something, maybe a acoustic guitar with somebody singing, and then follow that with a sprightly classical piece that fits with it.
I see.
And
because you do pairs, don't you?
No, it's
Not
usually
always?
3 or 4 songs in a set, sometimes 5.
Okay.
And lately it's evolved into, I do the Reaper Report, which I don't call it that, but when people pass on, then I'll put something in about them. And I usually close the show with that rather than, I don't know, do it in the middle. It's kind of,
yeah,
I don't know, a bummer, as we used to say.
I remember I've heard one of those reports from you.
Yeah.
You lost a cousin, I believe it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he was instrumental in some of my music tastes. He had wonderful music tastes.
Yeah.
And in the 80s, we used to send cassette tapes back and forth.
That's cool.
Back in the day, as it were. And yeah, he has several that I just have listened to death that he introduced me to.
That's cool. The talking that you do during your show is one of my favorite parts of your show, honestly.
Well, thank you.
Your music is, of course, great, but it's your description of that music after it's been played, and like, I've learned so much. Every time I've listened to your set, I've learned about the artists and the time period that the music's come from, and that's one of my favorite parts. So, well,
I try to keep it terse and succinct, as it were, and make it interesting, but not where you're going on and on about what the history of Western music is at that point. But in some cases, I've met some of the artists personally. Yeah. In the case of one of the ones that played on my Reaper Report, Wayne Kramer, who was in a band called MC5, the company I worked at for 17 years, where I did accounts receivable. They actually would have artists come by periodically and play in the cafeteria.
Oh, cool.
And he was one of them. And he was really friendly, and he signed my CD. And it was just really a special experience. So I like relaying that to the audience.
Yeah. That's cool. We get to like know you and live through the experience.
And I try not to make it seem like it's bragging, because it's not the idea.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll play artists that people aren't familiar with simply because I've met them.
That's cool.
Or had a special experience with their music at some point.
Yeah. Are there any other artists that you've seen or met that stand out to you? Have you?
Oh, that'd be a good one. Randy Newman.
Okay. It sounds familiar, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, boy, talk about performance anxiety. No, he doesn't want to talk much. I came within 10 feet of Chuck Berry, but he didn't want to meet the fans. And we had a show where we did a private show for the company, and then people that wanted to do business with the company. And Chuck Berry was at that show, and we unveiled a life-size statue of him doing the duck walk. And I got to manage the sculptor that did the statue.
No way.
And let's see, of the great maxims I can come up with: don't manage a sculpture. Don't manage a sculptor.
Okay. Anyway,
we got it done. I had to get testy with him on a few occasions. Creative types aren't good at managing a schedule.
Yeah.
It's, we got 3 weeks out and you don't have the head done yet, that kind of thing. So,
what is the duck walk?
That was Chuck Berry. Well, I'd have to demonstrate it for the audience. It was something he was famous for when he was young, and it was kind of doing, he's playing the guitar, and he always played a Gibson. Okay. And he was doing kind of this. And that's a duck. I mean, I'm not doing it very well, but you need more space.
He goes across the stage.
Yeah, okay. And it was a big hit because anything that was vivid like that got the audience's attention.
Totally.
Yeah.
You can, if you
name... Peter Townsend is one of the all-time classics in being visual. Who else would be in this category? The singer for Red Hot Chili Peppers. I can't think of his name. Anyway, he's got a pretty strong visual sense, and it wasn't until I saw their Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction ceremony that I got the message.
Yeah.
Although I still particularly like the band.
It's interesting how important a stage performance and stage
Anthony
presence.
Kiedis.
That's his name.
Yeah.
I was not going to remember that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that whole presence on stage is like almost as important as the music being played. Yeah. If you're going to be performing live, it's a huge part of it.
Right.
And,
no argument.
Yeah. I learned that very recently I did not. At the beginning of the year, when we interviewed King Youngblood, one of the just local.
They were really
bands.
friendly. I met them.
Oh yeah, they're awesome. So cool. I can't wait to see them at Tree Fort. I'm not sure if they're going to be at Tree Fort this year, but regardless,
I saw the playbill. I think they're on it.
Are they?
I think. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I know they were there last year for sure, but when seeing their stage performance and them talking about how important it is, it was eye opening to me. It was cool.
Yeah.
I never thought about that.
Did I answer your question about how I get my mix-ups?
You did.
Okay.
Yes.
I try to do things that are compatible without being stereotypical. And as I learned from a couple other people, it's all about the segue. So you're going from one song to another. And sometimes if it's a really abrupt one, which I can't avoid because there's no other place to put the song, I'll sort of stop and I'll talk and I say, "You ready? Buckle your seatbelt." And whammo, the next song comes on. You follow a ballad with something that's got a really hardcore intro, and it's like, so yeah, I usually don't go from one to the other.
No, your interjections are so entertaining. Like when you talk about the dinosaur wheel.
The dinosaur dial,
yeah. The dinosaur dial, that's what it is.
Well, I was trying to be mildly hip in that how many people, I was wrong. I didn't think a lot of people would be listening on the FM signal. In the case of both stations, 80% of the audience is on FM.
Yeah.
And I just think of FM as sort of a technology of the past.
Yeah.
And I figure streaming would be where the audience was, and it's not. At least not over there. I can't speak for here because I don't see the stats.
Which is why it surprises me that U of I can know how many people are listening on FM, because I feel like that's impossible.
Well, they hire a service is the way this usually works, and they have their ways of determining from doing surveys.
Okay.
In some cases, if you do it online, then all you can do is check how many people are following the stream.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, maybe KZUU needs one of those services. So that'd be pretty interesting.
You have that map where it shows how many people are listening.
But that's only through the stream online.
Yeah, so that's how many streamers you are. You
right.
Maybe multiply that by 3 or 4 and you have the total audience.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. Yeah. It would be interesting to know as well as they know, for sure. I guess outside of the artists that you've met through work, have you been to any proper concerts?
Well, I go to the other Domains Jazz Festival every year.
Oh yeah. There's another one coming up pretty soon,
yeah,
right?
They changed the month. It's in April now, and
okay.
That's because I have a show on Friday. I don't attend the Friday shows,
mm-hmm.
but it's always been worthwhile, and they have a festival of that magnitude that's that well known, and I do a couple of shows usually in front of it where I play some of the artists that they've appeared at this festival.
That's cool,
and big names, and to have that in this area is pretty impressive.
Yeah. And
so I've done that every year. But since the pandemic, there haven't been a lot of shows here, at least from my. The one I remember was Macklemore, because it was on the Beasley Coliseum reader board, and
right.
It postponed it half a dozen times, and then finally the schedule wouldn't allow it.
Yeah. So
there just hasn't been much here to go to.
We had Young Gravy, if you know who that is.
Oh yeah, I played the one that's clean.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome.
It's got a sample of Mr. Sandman.
Yeah.
And what I played it for was my cover-up, which is 2 songs that are the same song, but they don't have anything in common.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was mine, because Mr. Sandman from the 1960 version is the other one everybody knows.
And then there's Young Gravy who's sampling it. That
puts it right in the middle.
That's hilarious. Yeah. Yeah, we haven't, other than him, we haven't had too many.
Yeah, so it's not a big problem. And then I have to be careful because I'm old. I have tinnitus. Enclosed spaces with a cement floor and a lot of people and a lot of noise is hard. So an outdoor show is okay, or a large arena is probably okay, because I did the ICCU last year and it was okay. It was loud.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not as excited about loud as I used to be. Anyway, the music thing, I started in high school, and I went out. We used to say I had a wild hair, and I decided I was going to buy 2 albums at once. And I brought them home, and my mother was like, "You're wasting your money. 2 albums in the same day. That's what an outrageous expense." And,
what?
Full price too. And so those were my first 2 rock and roll records, and it kind of got started from there. And so I just kept going with it. And we had a really good record store for the size of the community in Reno, and a good radio station for that matter.
And is that the record store you went to work at?
No.
Okay.
That was in Bellingham.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
But I've said this numerous times. We had one station where I lived in my era that played rock, believe it or not, one. And it was an AM station. And FM stations only played beautiful music or news or things like that. Beautiful music meaning very soothing. And very, I say that on the air sometimes, oceans of beautiful music all the time. And I usually play some punk rock, something, but from that. But that was an actual promo campaign at one point.
Interesting.
Yeah.
What is the difference between FM and AM?
It's a difference in the frequency of the cycles of the electronic charge that you're sending into the atmosphere. And so an AM station, because it's a lot stronger, will carry thousands of miles at times.
I see.
I profiled Peter Schickele died recently, and he was a PDQ Bach, which was a parody of classical music. And I heard this on a clear channel stations, what they used to be called, when I was driving across the Midwest, and this is from Little Rock, Arkansas, which is 1,000 miles away, and it was just came in clear as a bell.
Wow.
Yeah. But AM stations sound, if you don't like surface noise, that's a format you don't want to hear. So it's a real intense, trebly, crackly kind of broadcast. Whereas FM was perfectly suited for rock music because it was much clearer and a much better sound.
Interesting.
It's just 100 miles is a long way for an FM signal.
I can see that. Yeah.
It's like this station, it's really north and south. So I've gotten the station as far as Plummer, Idaho, which is halfway to Coeur d'Alene.
Really?
Yeah. But if you go to Colfax, poof.
Gone?
Yeah.
Huh. That's interesting. I didn't know that.
So with the way the antenna is configured, I think partly, and then maybe some atmospheric conditions that allow it to happen.
Yeah. That's interesting. My little radio that I have at home that I used to listen in, and it's breaking on its own, so it's very staticky sometimes.
Okay.
And I worry that it's our station, but I don't think it is. I think it's just the radio.
But anyway, in an era when you wanted to hear rock while you were driving, you had to get one of these clear channel stations. So I would be, say, driving at night out of Denver or something like that, and I'd be listening to a Chicago radio station.
Wow.
Or Detroit or New York sometimes if you're in the right place.
Huh.
And then that's when all the low power stations would go off the air at night, and the clear channel stations were a force.
Was it all rock?
Oh, well, it was
Mostly.
what was thought of as rock then. I mean,
Okay.
rock has always been, when rock was top 40, you'd have everything from Jimi Hendrix to Olivia Newton-John on the same station, sometimes back to back, in terms of one would segue into the other. So I did time travel where I did 1968, which was like one of the all-time years. You're either doing drugs all the time and seeing colors, and then the next one would be something that was traditional pop of some sort, which would be the total opposite.
Yeah.
Yeah, but on the same station in the same show.
Strange.
Yeah. So, and there was a lot more personality radio, as they would say in those days. Not the way it is now, which is more political commentary being the personalities, but
yeah,
the rock DJs were.
It's like that person, and you're like looking forward to listening to that.
Yeah, well, there's one guy in Seattle did bird calls. And he had some personas that were kind of off the wall, and if you connected with that, it was really good, and they were really popular.
That's cool.
Yeah, in Los Angeles, I think it was KRLA was the big pop station, and then Wolfman Jack, who no longer is well known, but he had a station in Ciudad Juarez, and they didn't care about American broadcasting laws down there, so they had 150,000 watt stations, and at night, where I lived in Western Nevada, you could pick this station up as they were right down the street. And this is like 1,500 miles away. And the guy was a maniac.
Was he entertaining though?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, well, that's good.
And plus, they did advertising for things that were shocking.
I can only imagine.
Yeah, no, it was a real experience, and we used to get a real charge out of it. So when you're teenagers, like, wow, isn't this the real deal? Or
That's cool. I wonder, because I don't know. College students are the ones talking, mostly college students are the ones talking on these radio waves. And I wonder what younger people, I wonder if younger kids tune into college radio to see what heinous things are being said by us.
I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say. And because this is different than the other side of the invisible line, it's hard to say.
Yeah.
There are still lots of maniacs out there in college radio DJing. I mean, I have one guy that follows me sort of some of the time, and he did a 5-hour show just because he wanted to, which I think is pretty cool. I mean, if I were managing somebody like that, it'd be hard if you had somebody that was supposed to come on after that.
Yeah. But
that kind of energy level is what you want. And sometimes those people come with an audience.
Definitely. We have a DJ here that does a 4-hour set sometimes, but It's always
Is that Denver?
Not Denver. It's Will, the guy man.
Oh, I don't. Yeah, I've had minimal contact with him, so I couldn't say. But yeah,
he does his set, into the middle of the night, so nobody's coming on after him and not in the way. But he's just
that's the kind of energy you want in something like this. You want people who are really fired up about it and have a real passion or a real mission of some kind. And
Will is definitely one of those people.
Yeah, this guy that I'm thinking of has a record case is about this big and about this high, and it has a little latch on it. And he brings in his LPs, his vinyl LPs. And
really?
It's always amazing to me because one of them he brought it in 3 times now as the first Black Sabbath album. That's 1970, so that's my era.
Yeah.
And I don't particularly care for this album, but anyway, it's like, how does somebody that's 19 or 20 get Black Sabbath albums?
Yeah. Passion,
I guess. Or mom and dad, or maybe grandpa.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Definitely someone in the family has passed those down. That'd be cool.
The guy had hired me or said yes, it would be a better way to put it. I used to play the long version of Inagata Davida, and if your listeners don't know what that is, just look up Iron Butterfly, and there's a 17-minute song that's their signature tune, and it's got a 10-minute drum solo in the middle of it. And he used to play that like every other show.
Wow.
And he's 23 now. It's like, that came out in 1968. So that's what's really changed.
I'm not a big fan of 17-minute long songs, personally.
Yeah, it's one of those you had to be there kinds of experiences. As I told the guy, I met him, the drummer. I said, you exploded a bomb in my classmate's head with that solo. And he's kind of like, yeah.
That's
but it was interesting, yeah. They played at a staff meeting.
Really?
Yeah. It was
all of it?
No, they played that song, and they just came out for one song. They flew them up from Los Angeles to play a staff meeting, and they played one song, and it was the 17-minute Inagata Davida.
Wow!
And they were up there. It's like they were honoring people who had been there 10 years or whatever. And they said, we were just having a discussion the other day about who started heavy metal. Was it Steppenwolf or was it an Iron Butterfly? And so I'm not thinking anything about it. And then they introduced the members of Iron Butterfly to the staff meeting, and it's like, what?
Wow.
Yeah, and so then they played it.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I'm surprised to hear how many like artists and musicians that you've gotten to meet through a job that has to do with accounting. That seems kind
of the company did business music. So they no longer exist, but in a past life, you went to a mall and you heard pop music playing. They were one of the 2 companies that did that.
Okay.
So yeah, and it was just one of those things where I knew somebody who worked at the company, and I was transitioning from trying to be a teacher to doing something in the real world, as it were. And that was the company I ended up at. So we had people coming in periodically.
Well, that makes more sense then.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool. I just thought of a question for you that Zeke pointed out to me. And he pointed out that, and it makes sense because of how many different places you've lived, but is it true that you care about the places that a song is either from or talks about? Is that one of the criteria that makes
That's one of my taglines. Did I say I like songs with geographic references?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I did.
So what's that about? Do you have like...
Oh, I don't know. I like well-written songs, and sometimes I've had some experiences where profound for me, where I get a chill from music. Not everybody gets this, but it's like one of these times where you're just frozen there.
Yeah.
And it's because of what's in the song. And so in this particular case, I had a friend point out that this probably happens every 15 minutes in this particular place from your home area.
Okay.
I was driving across the Bay Bridge, the old one, and they played Tony Bennett singing I Left My Heart in San Francisco. And it was one of those, like, I'm driving into the city and it's like, listening to this music, it's like, oh my God.
Yeah.
So that's part of it.
Well, I can relate to that feeling for sure.
Yeah. A really, really well-placed geographic reference has always been meaningful.
That's cool. It's cool to get to know like the subtleties of your music taste a little bit more. I like that. One question I meant to ask you earlier when I was talking about how your set mix-up is composed of many genres. Do you have a favorite genre of music? No?
No.
Flat out no?
And the reason is the reason for this is when I was growing up and people would be pretty much boxed in whatever they were, wherever they were. Most people, from my experience, is whatever you had in high school. You stick with that for 40 years in some cases.
Right.
So one time I was out in the yard gardening and I heard classic rock and I thought, they're carpenters or roofers in the neighborhood. And it was one of those things that they grew up in the 80s. So they were listening to this one station. See, I've been playing the same stuff for 50 years. So I wanted to do something mildly enlightening, where people would be exposed to stuff that maybe would be compatible with that, but you'd hear other material that would be that's not as well played or not as well known or as of high quality that people would want to hear.
That's cool. Opening the horizons of your listeners and yourself.
Yeah. I have different personas for different reasons as far as the genre is concerned.
I dig it. Well, are there any other, things you'd like to talk about? Or?
Well, the only other one I can think of would be anything of noteworthy. I wanted to live in a college town when I disconnected from the real world. And I was lucky in that I was trying to be a hired gun as I got older, because when you get past 50, listeners probably don't want to know this, but you kind of become a piece of meat at that point. And so you don't have any careers of any significance unless you're really specialized. And so what I wanted to do is be a hired gun in accounts receivable, because there's all kinds of companies out there that have financial problems, and it's because they're just in disarray in one place or another. So I wanted to be somebody to bring in and fix the problem, or help the problem, and move on. And so I did pretty well with that. Well, I just happened to get one company in Seattle that did, of all things, eye tissue.
Eye tissue? Like
eye tissue, so they harvested people's eyes when they were still warm corpse. Okay. There's no other way to put it.
So donate.
Donors. Yeah. You were an organ donor, and anyway, and so they wanted to hire me, which I really didn't want to do. I wanted to continue being a hired gun, but they were persuasive about it, and they let me move here.
Really?
Yeah. So I worked here before the pandemic from home.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I was replaced by a software program. So it's a modern scenario.
Damn.
But on the other hand, I got 2 years of working here at home.
And that's what led you to be here in Pullman.
Well, I want to live in a college town. I know it's one of these things. There's no guidebook on how to do this.
Yeah.
Or a guidebook on how to retire. I've never been any good at following a guidebook. You invest here and you do this and you work in this company for 30 years or whatever it is, and then you'll be on easy street. Well, I just not been particularly well suited for that. So I did the best I could.
Well, I respect your free spirit, John. It's inspiring.
I've been called that more than once. I don't know if it's always as a compliment, but there you
go. Well, I would just like to mention before we end this interview how much I appreciate the last few years of getting to know you, talking to you. You've been one of my closest allies here at the radio. You've always
I had no idea.
You really have. You've always been a bright face. You've always been just happy and nice, and sharing CDs with me. It's meant a lot to me. I would just like to formally say thank you.
You're welcome.
And
my pleasure. That's the reason. One of the reasons I do it. I want people to be inspired by something they hear and go off and take it somewhere else.
You do that. You've also inspired this podcast significantly. I wouldn't have gotten better at writing questions and my own performance as the interviewer had it not been for.
Well, you always. I'm being a teacher here. You always had this stuff. There's tweak.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you.
You're better at taking in suggestions than I was when I was 20 or 21. I was kind of a stubborn person.
I guess I have one last question before we end. I feel like someone of your age has a lot of wisdom. So if you could give your younger self one piece of advice, what would it be, if anything?
That's a good one. Don't take yourself too seriously. I saw it in an 8th grade poster. I wish I had a copy of it. There's a picture of a dog frowning, and that's what it said. Don't take yourself too seriously. Yeah.
That's cool.
Just the world is not going to end because of a decision you made in this particular period or in this part of your life, and there's other parts of your life. And, the world is unfair, but it can be forgiving, and persist with your dream.
I like it. I like it. I feel like those exact lessons have been kind of presenting themselves to me.
Now, if I could just follow my own advice, we'd be in great shape, right?
Wouldn't that be just great for all of us?
Do as I say, not as I do.
Right?
Yeah.
Right on. Well, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for everything you've done for KZUU.
You're welcome.
You've been listening to KZUU 90.7 FM Pullman. I've been your host, DJ Daisy. This is the conclusion of episode 8, What's New Wazzu, with our beloved John Bo. I hope you guys have a great rest of your Thursday afternoon. And I'll be back next week with another interview. So take care.